The project that I chose to do is Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee. As you may or may not know, these two generals were involved in our country's Civil War, one of the greatest American wars ever. These two men were at the heart of the war, as Grant was the head general for the Union Army and Lee was the head general of the Confederate Army. Today, both men are considered some of the greatest American generals of our history. What I hope to show you in this presentation is how both men came to be great war heroes and how Grant was more successful of the two during the Civil War. Ulysses S. Grant was born on April 27, 1822 in Ohio. He began his military career early in life at the age of 17 when he enrolled at West Point Academy in New York. He was able to get a nomination from his congressman, Thomas L. Harner. Grant graduated West Point, ranking 21st in a class of 39. Throughout his time at the academy, Grant was known as an expert horseman. However, upon graduation, he was assigned to managing supplies and equipment despite having shown a natural ability to fight well on a horse. Grant saw his first real military action in the Mexican-American War as a lieutenant under Generals Zach Taylor and Winfield Scott. Although he was still assigned to managing supplies, Grant was able to get some frontline action and really experience what the battles were like. For his efforts in the war, Grant was honored twice for his bravery at Molino del Rey and Chapultepec. After the war, Grant decided to stay in the Army and was sent to numerous different stations. However, his wife, who was pregnant with their child, could not come with them because his salary was not enough for him to support a family. Grant eventually decided to resign from the Army in 1854. At this time, he was promoted to captain and sent to California. However, because he couldn't bring his family with him, he resigned. It is believed by some biographers that he resigned because his drinking and depression problems he had. However, to this day, the War Department states there is no talks of Grant drinking while on duty. Life as a civilian was hard for Grant. He held several different jobs. He failed at many of these jobs and as a desperation asked his father if he could help get him a job. He was able to work in his younger brother's leather shop as a secondary assistant. This was a very tough time in Grant's life, as he had no direction, which the military had given him since he was 17. Robert E. Lee was born on January 19, 1807 in Westmoreland County, Virginia. His father, Harry Lee, was a Revolutionary War hero and was nicknamed Light Horse Harry. Lee's ancestors were very wealthy. However, his father was on the opposite side of many financial problems, mostly from the many failed investments he had. Lee grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, and moved around from house to house, living with different relatives, because after his father died, the family was deeply in debt. Despite the family's debt, Lee was a very good student who was extremely gifted in mathematics. In 1825, Lee enrolled at the United States Military Academy. While there, Lee excelled as he became the first student to earn the rank of sergeant after completing his first year. He graduated in 1829 as one of only 5 students to complete 4 years at the academy with no demerits. He also graduated top in his class in artillery and tactics and second overall in a class of 46. Like Grant, Lee also served in the Mexican-American War. However, he played a more important role, serving as the chief assistant to Winfield Scott in his march from Veracruz to Mexico City. As a staff officer in the war, Lee was key in many American victories. Lee became known for his finding various routes of attack that the Mexicans were not ready for because they thought the terrain was too tough. Lee was promoted several times throughout the war, all the way up to colonel, but his permanent rank was still captain. Both men had good military backgrounds in their past, and both men needed the military for their own reasons. As you will see, however, It is Grant who was the better general for this war. The tactics he used far outmatched those of Lee's. When the war first began, Grant originally signed up as a volunteer and didn't like the position he was in at the time. He wrote letters to his family members saying he would be home soon and not involved in the war at all. Grant eventually left, but decided to leave the volunteer army for good and tried to enroll back into the regular army. However, Grant had a bad reputation that followed him around. It was that of a deadbeat military officer who had been discharged, which did not help. However, Grant finally caught a break when the colonel of the 21st Regiment of Illinois was fired and needed to be replaced. Grant was the man chosen to replace him. It was through this position that Grant worked his way up all the way to become the head of the Union Army. Lee took a much different route in becoming the head of the Confederate Army. Lee never wanted to be a part of the Confederacy, unless his home state of Virginia seceded from the Union. As soon as Virginia seceded, Lee was ready to fight for the Confederacy. He rose through the ranks quickly and eventually became the head of the Confederate Army. Grant won many major battles for the Union Army early on in the war. Among them were Fort Henry, Battle of Shiloh, Battle of Vicksburg, and the Battle of Chattanooga. With the Union controlling much of the war, Grant decided to plan for victory. His plan included putting General William Sherman in charge of almost all the Union forces out west. Grant himself was going to focus on Virginia. Virginia was a key state in Grant's plan for victory. It was the most influential state in the Confederacy, and maybe the Union too. If Grant could control Virginia, the Union had a great chance at winning the war. However, first, he had to defeat the Army of Northern Virginia, who had defeated the Union Army many times before. However, this time, Grant had a plan for victory. His plan was to attack the Confederate Army from many different ways, in a coordinating strategy. This strategy would have the Union winning battles and taking over forts in Richmond, Shenandoah Valley, Atlanta, Georgia, and Mobile, Alabama. Of these forts, Richmond would be the most important, in that it was the capital of the Confederacy, and therefore if the Union gained control of this, it would stop all railroads in the South. Grant's plan turned out to be a great success, and Lee had no choice but to surrender at Appomattox soon after, thus ending the war. Grant showed his mastery of war time and time again throughout the Civil War, creating new strategies and catching the Confederacy off guard many times. Grant was one of the first generals to ever truly understand the idea of total war and devise a plan of that magnitude to ultimately win the war for the Union. Lee will still go down in history as one of the greatest generals of all time. However, in regards to the Civil War, Grant was the best general for the war and the best general put in charge of preserving the Union. The end. Thank you for taking the time to come to my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it and have a great day.